Welcome back, minors. My name is Amber Johnston, and I'm a counselor here at Student Wellbeing.
My name is Tracy Kriegel. I'm a counselor here at the Student Wellbeing Center as well. It's time for your morning cup of joe.
So, Tracy, what do you know about emotional resiliency?
Great question, Amber. Have you ever heard of that statement, just roll with the punches?
Yes.
So just want you to think people who deal with high levels of stress, they just kind of go with it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the definition of emotional resiliency. So I wanted to relate emotional resiliency to a very popular TV show, and that's called Friends. You know, are you familiar with Friends?
I'll be there for you.
Absolutely. Apparently, it's become popular again, and it teaches us so much about emotional resiliency in life. So, let's start with the first one. We'll dive right in here.
Go for it.
The first thing, in order to maintain emotional resiliency, we should maintain good boundaries. And my example of that is Phoebe and her relationship with Mike. Phoebe meets Mike at the coffee house, and they have a great relationship. Mike tells Phoebe that he never wants to get married, and she breaks up with him. She wants to get married someday, and she doesn't want to invest further in a relationship that doesn't have a future. It's not what she wants. And they end up getting back together in the end. And as Mike decides that he would rather marry her than end the relationship, Phoebe could have tried to convince him or hope that he'd eventually change his mind, but she didn't. She stuck to her boundaries, and she showed that this is really what she wanted. And she said, what you want out of life is not what I want, and that's not compatible. And that is good, healthy boundaries.
Go Phoebe.
Right.
we need more people like that to just stand up for what they want to do in life.
Oh, right. Like, you see so many couples that end up together, and they have this, what I call these terminal relationship enders, and they continue on with the relationship even though there's an expiration date with it, and it ends up being twice as painful or 3 times as painful when the relationship does end, because now they've spent years together and all this time, even though what they want out of life isn't even aligned. Mm-hmm. So we've got to, make sure and hold those boundaries. If this is something that's truly important to you, maintain it.
Right.
So the second one I had was surround yourself with supported people who are resilient. And isn't that kind of the basis for the whole show?
Right, exactly.
Even like you sang so eloquently before.
If you're willing to get into a water fountain with people and you're fully clothed, those are supportive people, right?
Right. So even the theme song says, it isn't your day, your month, or even your year, but I'll be there for you. And enough said. So the next one is own your stuff.
That's right.
So Ross can't ever admit when he's made a mistake. We see this in examples of him where with "we were heartbreak" in the letter that Rachel wrote him, that he has never had the ability to look at himself objectively.
Never.
So he's not great at this. Then you have Chandler, on the other hand, and he developed feelings for a girl that Joey is dating, and he ends up kissing her. And so Joey is thinking about moving out and then ready to end their friendship. And the girl, her name is Kathy, and they're having this whole disagreement, almost ends their friendship, and Chandler he owns it. He's like, I made a mistake, and he climbs into this wooden crate to think about what he's done, and Kathy ends up coming in and breaking things off with Chandler while he's still in the box. And Chandler does nothing. He says nothing. And the reason why he does this is he's showing he's willing to let this girl go in order to save his friendship with Joey. So when we see this, like, the difference is Ross was never able to admit that he was wrong. And Chandler says, okay, this is Joey's girlfriend. I made this mistake. I'm going to deal with these consequences, but I don't want to lose him as a friend. And see how different the outcomes were. Ross continually had no ability to be self-reflective. Mm-hmm. And it ended his relationships over and over again. Mm-hmm. So, own your stuff. Okay. The next one is be kind to yourself. Both Phoebe and Joey continue to do what they love despite the number of times that they failed, despite the criticism. They just did what they loved. Joey was an actor and Phoebe was a musician. Phoebe eventually gets her song professionally recorded, and when she finds out that her voice was dubbed over, she feels sorry for the girl who dubbed her voice. Like, it doesn't make her feel bad. She feels sorry for the person whose voice was used. So she never gets famous for singing, but she did what she loved, and she never took criticism to heart.
We can never forget Smelly Cat.
No.
Smelly Cat, Smelly Cat.
What are they feeding you? Joey struggles through getting killed off as Dr. Drake Ramore, and then he gets fired from numerous acting roles over the years, and by the end of the show, he ends up landing a multi-million-dollar 3-movie job, and that ends up being like his big break. And then we have one of my absolute favorite episodes, Phoebe running. Phoebe has all of these quirks, and one of them is the way that she runs, and she runs kind of like a Muppet. Like, her arms are kind of flailing around all over the place, and Rachel is really embarrassed to go out in public with Phoebe with her running like this. And so she tells Phoebe this, like, look, you're embarrassing me. And Phoebe chooses to run that way because for her it makes it fun. And so she's just like, this is the way I run. And she could have taken what Rachel said at heart. She could have changed in order to make Rachel happy and less embarrassed. She could have stopped doing what she loved because it was embarrassing, but she didn't. She was just unapologetically herself. And in the end, Rachel ends up running like Phoebe because it was a lot more fun.
She just stayed herself, which is the best part of being a friend. You can be who you are, be real.
Yes. And the scene where she finally, she looks around and then she starts running like Phoebe. It's like, oh, that scene's so fantastic.
Right. It's awesome.
And then we have Chandler and his sense of humor. And I'm not great at advice. Can I interest you in a sarcastic comment? He knows his limitations and he's okay with it. So when we look at all of these situations, they're not being overly critical of themselves. They're taking their themselves with a grain of salt and some humor, mm-hmm. and being kind to themselves and not overly critical. And that's so important for emotional resiliency.
It is. When you have a friend and you have supportive people, being able to be who you are is part of being able to have that emotional resiliency. When you can just run with those arms flailing around and your best friend goes, yeah, I don't know what that's all about, but then the best friend just joins you on the street. That's emotional resiliency. That's where stress level just goes from skyrocketed to the lowest level, and you can go out there on the street and just be you.
Right.
That's just having fun, and that's just dealing with life and just enjoying who you are.
Exactly. You're handling stress better. You are responding better to when you get the punches, like you talked about earlier. When those punches happen, you're more able to respond to it because you're kind to yourself.
Right. I think I remember always seeing them sitting around the kitchen table.
Yes.
That was one place that they always was gathering around that kitchen table, enjoying their friendship.
Uh-huh.
So it was the gathering place.
Yes. That in the coffee shop, sitting in those They get the 2 chairs on the other end and the couch.
Yeah, you were talking about Smelly Cat. Do you remember the episode where she actually sung and made everybody sing it with her?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
I love it.
good.
They do a little round at the end where they each sing a piece of it.
Yep, absolutely. So.
The next one is don't use distraction to avoid your issues. Chandler does this a lot, typically by getting involved with Janice. Yet again. Oh my God.
Can't ever forget her saying that.
Yes. My Janice impression is terrible. She was so unique. But when he's facing an issue and he doesn't want to deal with it, what's the first thing he does? He runs and gets back together with Janice. And that's him avoiding his problems. He's avoiding his feelings. He's avoiding dealing with it. And instead, he's just going to run back to this relationship that he knows isn't going to work. And that he knows it's going to be bad when it doesn't work. But he does that.
Yeah.
The next one, it's okay to not know everything. This is a hard one to remember because sometimes we feel like we should have all the answers, we should know what to do, and it's okay to not know. When Rachel left her fiance and struck out on her own after a lifetime of being spoiled, and she had no idea what was going to happen, she just left her wedding in her wedding dress. She took a leap, and while there were hard times, she struggled financially, and she ended up working in the fashion industry, which was her dream. And that's where her interest and her passion lies. And she ended up eventually getting a job at Louis Vuitton, and she ends up not taking it in the end. Spoiler alert for a show that's been over for how many years now?
Yeah. Oh, you gotta watch it on HBO Max because it even got discontinued on Netflix. Whatever's that about.
But the point is that you never know where the road may lead you. And we went from her supposed to be a rich socialite wife who never works to her ending up getting her dream job at Louis Vuitton. It's amazing. And none of that would have happened if she had been worried about all of the things she didn't know and all of the plans she didn't have laid out.
I think that just goes to talk about who she was as a person, because it's not about money, it's not about that wealth, it's not about, it's more about her following her dream. It was more about her setting that goal, that mark that she wanted to achieve. And I think that's, that talks a lot about this show, Friends, because they utilize the support of each other. They grew together. But in the end, of everything that we're going to keep talking about, but there was support. And that's part of building emotional resiliency. But she still knew what she wanted to achieve. And it wasn't about Dad was going to tell me what to do. It wasn't about what money was going to buy me. It was more about I had a goal in mind of what I wanted to achieve, and I was going to do it.
Independence.
And she was just independent. Yeah, exactly. And I think for students who are listening to this, you're going to go through struggles, and things aren't going to be the easiest day. But, if you've got your goals, I think those are the things that you look for. And if you've got support systems, you need them, they're here on this campus. And I think it's that piece that, when you're having a bad day, it's that piece that, you hang out. It's going to be tough days, but you ride the wave,
Right.
Those are those days, if it's the coffee shop you have to go find and sit on the couch, that's the days that you do. And so
remember when Rachel got her first paycheck from the coffee shop, and she was so proud, and she's like, "What's this?" Because all of this money had been taken out of her check.
Right. I love taxes.
One thing was FICA. She was like, "What's FICA?"
Right. Yeah. Yes, definitely.
So the next one is weigh the outcomes and how it'll affect you. When we have things bad happen, we often, and instead of actually looking at what the real effects of what's happening it will be, like how will this really affect my life, and often it's not as big of a deal as our mind wants to make it out to be. So in this one, think of all the major surprises in the show and how each of them ended up in wonderful things happening, even though it wasn't always the immediate response to the thing you would immediately think of, or it didn't seem like it was going to be a good thing at a time. So Monica accidentally hooked up with Chandler when she was actually looking for Joey at Ross's rehearsal dinner. She was depressed because she had just, she was not getting, her brother's getting married for the second time, and she's never been married before, and she was depressed, and she decided she was going to hunt down Joey, and she actually accidentally found Chandler. And so then they hooked up, and she's sad, and she happens, and then it ends up they fall in love, and they have this relationship, and they get married, and that's the best relationship on the show. It's the most functional relationship on the show. It's amazing. And afterwards they're awkward, and they agree that it was stupid and it shouldn't have happened, but they decide to keep sleeping together until the trip is over, instead of freaking out over what happened and what the fallout could have been. And while they could have had fears that it would end their friendship or impact their friend group, it didn't. They ended up starting a relationship, and it went forward. It really blossomed.
I think I remember when they first started their relationship, they had to hide it. They felt like it was going to, it was like this big secret from everybody. And it was just like, oh my God, we can't let anybody know. And they would not be around anybody, and they would sneak around behind everybody, because it was just like,
you don't know.
Yeah, nobody can know that we're having a relationship.
They don't know that we know that they know that we know that they know.
Like the biggest secret,
And then you had Phoebe, who was going over there trying to flirt with Chandler.
Yeah.
They tried to get him to come out with it, and he accidentally tells Monica he loves her. It's hilarious. The next example I have is when Rachel ended up pregnant, and it was after a one-night stand with Ross, and so it wasn't exactly her ideal way to get pregnant. And so after telling Ross, he offers to marry her, which she declines, and then she goes on to have Emma all on her own. And then she and Ross co-parent their child together for a time, until they eventually get together at the end of the show. And Rachel was able to look at all the possible outcomes and make the best choice for herself based on the options. And Joey even offered to marry her, and all of these options came to try to support her while she raised Emma, and she's just like, this isn't what I need. This isn't the option I need. I don't need to marry Ross because he feels guilty. I don't need to marry Joey because he's just trying to be a good guy. I need to do what's best for me. And she did, and then things ended up working out for her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think honesty in our relationships is what's important, and I think that honesty with ourselves is also important, so, whatever your goals are within your relationship, I think being true to yourself, and you can see that in all of these relationships, and I think that's just key to healthy relationships. It very much is, and a lot of these things we're talking about, are just that prime picture of that. So
yes. Well, the next one is not a prime picture of a healthy relationship.
No. Show a good picture of that, right?
This one does not.
Okay,
so
good.
When Ross accidentally says Rachel's name while he's marrying another woman.
Oh, that's a good one.
So this could have been, when this happened, Ross was absolutely devastated, and the outcomes here could have been the end of the relationship and the end of his friendship with Rachel, and he could have even had to pay back all the money he spent on the wedding in London. And it does end up with Emily and Ross's relationship ending, but it allowed Ross and Rachel to end up together in the end. So the outcome actually didn't end up that bad. At the time, did it feel that bad? Yes. Did it feel like he was going to have to pay back the exorbitant amounts of money that was spent on that wedding? Yes, but in the end, it's what allowed him to get together with the woman he was really in love with, which was Rachel. And so my next example for ways to be more emotionally resilient is to get out of your own head. So one of my favorite Chandler quotes is, "My wallet is too small for 50s and my diamond shoes are too tight." This is quote from Chandler really shows how sometimes we get caught up in the bad things that are happening and forget the positive. Like, he's being completely sarcastic here. He's trying to point out that things aren't really that bad by overemphasizing, that my wallet's too small to hold all these 50s. And it doesn't mean you aren't allowed to have feelings about things. It just means sometimes we need a little perspective, and we need to sit back and look at things from a different point of view. And in this instance, Ross was struggling with dating two women at the same time, and Chandler was mocking him when he said it. But we can all use that objectivity when we're facing a problem. It doesn't mean that we can't feel things because somebody else has it worse. It just means that we need to take stock of the positives that we have going on too. And then the next example is, how many times did Ross have to learn this lesson? Yet another example is the infamous list, where Ross made a list of all the pros and cons for dating Julie versus Rachel. And Ross was trying to make a logical choice, but in reality, the biggest and only con for Julie was that she wasn't Rachel. Mm-hmm. And Ross knew that Rachel was who he wanted to be with, but he got caught up in thinking, he got stuck in his own head, and he ended up almost losing his relationship with Rachel before it even started because he made a list. Mm. And once again, he just lacked that ability to be objective, and he couldn't see the forest for the trees, so to speak.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So my last one, or my second to last one, is self-care, self-care, self-care. And for this one, I've got a few examples. Going to Central Park for coffee and spending time with friends. The episodes where Monica teaches Chandler to enjoy taking baths with the warm water and the scented oils. Baths can help us distress. You remember the little boat?
Yeah.
He had a little boat in the bath.
Right, I remember that.
Or when I mentioned Rachel and Phoebe running in the park, instead of just being exercise, Phoebe took care of herself, and she made sure it was an activity that she enjoyed, and by running in a way that made her feel freeing and made it fun for her. And then finally, what about the time when all the girls are feeling depressed because Ross is getting married for the second time, and they're single and have never been married, so they all dress up in their wedding dresses and sit on the couch and feel sad together?
It's funny. Yeah, there's times where we don't think that things are going to go the way we want them to go in life. And I remember there was the one episode where who was it that got married, and it was during the December or January, and they were outside. Phoebe got married, and it was in the midst of winter time, mm-hmm. and she didn't care. They went outside in the middle of the street, and she got married.
Yes.
And it was like nothing was raining on her parade.
Nope.
And, I think that's part of emotional resiliency.
Yes.
And you just go with it.
Mm-hmm.
And even when it seems like it's a bad day and things look grim or bad, you just put on your snow coat, your snow boots, and you just go outside and you make the very best of it. There's an old saying, it's like, dancing outside in the rain. That's what emotional resiliency is.
Yes.
It's not about, you can't go outside and just dance in the rain. Phoebe went outside and got married in the snow. It was a blizzard. Yes. Wasn't it? It was a blizzard.
Yes.
And
like half the people couldn't be there, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but her friends were there.
Yes.
And that's what made it the best part of the day,
Well, and that plays right into the last one on my list, which is pivot. Mm-hmm. Enough said. Sometimes we just have to change direction. We have to kind of roll with things, reevaluate, find a different way to get there, and where we want to go.
Right.
So, to kind of review our ways to be more emotionally resilient, maintain good boundaries. Surround yourself with people who are supportive and resilient. Own your stuff. Be kind to yourself. Don't use distraction to avoid your issues. It's okay to not know everything. Weigh the outcomes and how it'll affect you. Get out of your own head. Practice self-care. And last but not least, pivot. Thank you guys for joining us today, and I hope you have a great day. For more information about mental health and wellness, contact Student Wellbeing at 204 Norwood Hall. And you can also give us a call at 573-341-5400. 4211.
The song Happy Days is brought to us by music from www.free-stock-music.com.
You can also add and follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook using our handle @S&T Wellbeing.